Hey guys, Carl Allen. Welcome to another edition of the Creative Dealmaker podcast. So I'm going to do something very, very different today. I have lots of special guests, but this podcast is actually a recording of a really interesting session that I did yesterday with 6 or 7 of my top closers inside of Dealmaker Protégé. So they'll tell you the stories, the deals that they've done, how they overcame any challenges inside of their deal, how they structured their deals. So there were SBA acquisitions, there were annuity deals, there's people doing roll-ups, there's some incredible stuff going on inside of the community. And I thought it was really, really powerful because what's interesting is, I know you look at me as somebody that has been doing this for 3 decades, right? You're looking at me thinking, well, yeah, I know Carl Allen can close deals. It's his life, right? He's the best in the world. But what's really interesting as a business buying coach, which is what I do about 20% of my time, 10% of my time, the rest of my time, I'm out there buying businesses like crazy, like a lot of my students. But a lot of you guys look at me and say, I know he can do it, but when I can teach somebody else to do it that maybe 3 months ago was exactly in the same position that you were in. You didn't know how to close a deal. You didn't know how to find a deal. You didn't know how to raise capital. You didn't know how to vet professionally a business and give an opinion on value and how to structure that sort of deal. And you certainly might not know how to close a deal and then how to grow and optimize the business in the future, both organically and by acquiring other businesses into that group. So I pulled together a bunch of my friends. We had a big audience of about 500 people that were watching that. And I thought, wow, man, this is so powerful. I want to put this into the podcast. So absolutely enjoy the show. A very warm welcome to the Creative Dealmaker podcast. I'm Carl Allen. I'm your host, and I'm going to be interviewing expert guests sharing investor strategies that will completely and utterly disrupt the market when it comes to buying and selling businesses all over the world.
Excellent. Really interesting. In our live event that we had in Orlando back in September, we did a Protégé panel case studies, just letting people like you have here in front of you who have closed deals or multiple deals talk about their deals. Well, let's start with the most recent for me. Sri, let's go to you. Congratulations, first of all. You closed a pretty decent sized SaaS company in the SEO space very recently. You and I had a couple calls about that deal kind of as that was going through it. We had a lot of due diligence conversations, the future of that market and industry. Can you tell us a little bit, just briefly, about that deal that you just closed? Tell us some of the numbers as well. What was the revenue? What was the EBITDA? And then what was the deal structure?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, Chris and Carl, thank you for inviting me to this panel. It's an honor to be here. As to the deal, it took me almost 6 months to close. The price was around 2.75 million. The EBITDA was around, I want to say around 650K. So it was, the multiple would be around 4.2, 4.3, somewhere in that range. So what the company does is it helps bloggers optimize the SEO on their website, right? So that's the structure of the deal. The deal was structured in a 15% seller note, 5% buyer injection, and rest as an SBA deal. Okay. Anything else, Chris, you would like me to cover here?
Yeah, let's ask you this question. So it took you about 6 months. You closed the deal. What was the EBITDA on that? One more time.
Around 650K.
650K. So you took about 6 months to close the deal. There's free net cash flow of looks like about 30,000 plus a month coming from that business. Was that worth it? Was it worth the effort? Was it worth the wait?
I personally, for me, yeah, I think so. This is my second deal. I've done a deal in the past. This is a slightly bigger deal with an SBA. So there were a lot of things I didn't know. I didn't know whom to go to from who's the right lender to do this, right? There are a lot of open questions around how the business is doing, how the health of the business, the industry, with AI and a lot of the things that are happening around. Is this industry gonna go in the way it is looking right now, right? What changes can come in? So lots of open-ended questions that obviously I talked to lots of experts, and Chris, you have introduced me to few SEO experts in the space, right? So there was this open-ended around where the industry is going. Is it worth going after this deal? Is there enough cash flow after the debt payments and all of these acquisition, right? Everything had to be worked out, and it took a lot of time.
Well, think about this. So many people on the call and all these people in Protégé have all been through the mindset of, am I buying something that's going to continue on for many, many years? Am I buying what we would call a recession-proof business? Or am I buying a blockbuster that's going to be going out of business soon, right? So for someone like yourself, you looked at this industry, you see SEO, and you hear all these things. We even talked to some Google experts, if you remember, people who work for Google, and they're saying SEO is going away. Search is no longer going to be the thing. AI is taking over. OpenAI, ChatGPT, Perplexity, even Google AI, where they don't give you search results, they give you your answers. Like when you go through your due diligence to say, hey, I'm going to buy this SEO company, obviously there's some disruptions potentially in the future of SEO. I think it's important to talk a little bit about some of the learning lessons you learned around due diligence. Like, what if you would have skipped over some of your due diligence or did it differently? You may not have made an educated decision. You may have said, you know what, from the 4 people I've spoken to, SEO, quote unquote, is not going very well. It's not going the right direction. I'm not going to do this deal. But as you dug in deeper, you actually realized that the market is so large and it's going to take 10 years for it to diminish. And there's also a lot of low-hanging fruit on the door. So I think you made a good decision even getting into a market that some people may look at as not sure if I'm going to do that. That's not going to be a market that's going to be powerful for the next 10 years. What else I love about you is your background and other stuff you're doing, and you're already leveraging AI. So I think for you, looking at what does this business look like for me to buy, you have the ability to bring in some of the other stuff you're doing. You're going to have some good cross-selling, and you're going to be able to bring this business into the future. Carl talks about that all the time, especially during COVID. A lot of his students were buying businesses or just bought a business that gets disrupted. It's time to innovate and move towards the future. So one more question for you, then I want to move on to somebody else and we'll come back to you. Is what's the biggest learning lesson that you learned? Like you said, a lot of stuff you obviously didn't know going into it. What's the littlest thing that made the biggest difference, or what was your biggest learning lesson?
Yeah, that's a great question, Chris. I want to take 30 seconds quickly to touch upon that industry part of it. Look, I was actually super scared because I didn't know, like, am I taking a big liability on myself, like where a lot of my assets are at risk, like a business is at risk, right? But the thing I realized is that, a lot of people talk about AI and things like that, right? So I see AI as an enabler in a lot of these businesses, and change is constant, right? So you always have to go out there, continue to innovate, continue to see how you can leverage these tools to improve your business, and in a very incremental form, right? Like one step at a time, like smaller increments, right? So like you mentioned, there is opportunities everywhere. You just have to make sure that you understand that and take a accessible risk with respect to, hey, if I put this amount of capital, can I actually navigate through and make this a successful business in the next few years, right? To your question on like, hey, what was one thing that I learned through the process in deal making? I think, Carl talks about this all the time, and maybe this is kind of a cliche, but I'll just mention this. The rapport you build with the seller and with the banker actually goes a long way. We underestimate, either take it for granted or we underestimate the importance of investing into it, right? It actually helped me a lot during this deal process. And when I look back, I actually realized that, oh, I did all of these things. Some of it came naturally to me, because of which I was able to actually push the deal all the way through, right? So that's the biggest lesson I took away.
So Carl talks about seller psychology and how on Main Street, it plays such a big role in acquisitions compared to on Wall Street, it's almost all numbers, right? So Carl, maybe you can touch on that a little bit. We're just talking about how Sri said one of the biggest learning lessons and things that made the biggest difference is the power of rapport with the bank and with the seller.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. So you go back 20 years ago when I was doing billion-dollar deals on Wall Street, they're not really about rapport and relationship. It's about math and engineering and tax structures and legals and all these different things. And when I left the corporate world in 2008, started doing my own deals, I was shocked that I'd sit down with the seller and say, hey, well, how much do you want for your business? And they said, well, we don't know, but like, I want to get to know you. Like, what are your values? Like, what are you going to do with my business? Are you going to protect my employees? Are you going to honor the legacy that I've built? How are my customers going to feel about you? And once I figured out how to deal with that in a conversation, price and terms became very much a secondary issue. And I would actually argue that 90% of most Main Street deals are around seller psychology. And then once you've cracked that, the price and terms can get a lot easier to negotiate.
100%. And then also think about being a trusted, safe pair of hands. How big of a role did that play for you, Sri? Like somebody talking to you and understanding your background, you were probably interrogated at some level in a nice way by the SBA and the lenders and by the seller. How important was your background in technology and in marketing play into your ability to be that trusted, safe pair of hands?
It carries a lot of weight, right? I worked at some of the larger companies in the world, like Microsoft, Oracle, Uber. So that gave me a lot of like attention, or like a seat at the table at least, right? It also made it a little bit more easier this time because I had acquired a company earlier, so that also gave me more credibility. And I would always go look back and say the first deal was the hardest to do. A lot of people would question the ability around transition from a corporate world to a small business. Can you run it? Like, even when you see things like it's done very differently in each of these environments, right? This time, like, recently, like it plays a huge role, which is why I think it's important to note that when you're purchasing a business, you want to stay in your lane, or you want to show your experience and depth of how to run the company. And it's also important not just to get the deal done, it's also important to, beyond once the deal is done, the idea is to grow and scale it. And you need to have that level of depth to actually take the company to the next level, right? So staying in the lane, knowing or partnering with somebody who's really good at, in that particular industry makes a ton of sense, right? It gives the trust. It gives the trust with the seller, the buyer, sorry, the seller, the broker, the banker, all of them.
Well, thanks for sharing with us. We're really impressed by not just your first deal, but your second one as well. Thank you for sharing this wisdom. I think it's amazing to hear someone who came from a big corporate world, and we have all these fears, we have these doubts. Sometimes we have imposter syndrome. We have these things inside of us saying, hey, I'm not sure I can do this because I'm not good at this, this, and this. And your idea of staying in your lane, number one, was what Carl teaches, building lots of rapport, taking the time necessary to close these deals. You walked into quite a bit of cash flow. It's all worth the journey. And the beauty is the journey is the actual beautiful part. You learn so much along the way. You've met so many people inside of Protégé and during our events that can help you when you get stuck, even beyond just Carl or myself or any of our coaches. So thanks for everything. And we're excited to keep watching you close more deals. I want to jump over to Valerie and Jonathan next, if that's okay. So I'm going to switch over to you all. Hello there. I'm going to drop him. Let's talk about you all. So first of all, how many deals have you closed so far?
Hey, Chris, so far we've
Hey.
closed one, and it's a commercial landscaping company.
Commercial landscaping. Beautiful. And this is in North Carolina?
Yep.
Yep, North Carolina.
And you've blown that business up, right? You've almost doubled it since you bought it, correct?
Yeah, it's that we've done really, really well with it.
This beautiful thing. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just, you guys are my favorites. You know that. Like Valerie, you and I had that moment at the Atlanta Dealmaker event where you came up to me and you just said, and I'll let you tell the story, that this was going to be a big life change for you and your family in pursuing business acquisitions, and it really touched me, right? So like we became very good friends from that point. But yeah, talk through the deal and some of the challenges that you must have gone through when you did it, because I know your life, whilst amazing, it's not perfect, is it? You have some things going on.
For sure, Carl. And yeah, let me go back to the beginning. Like when we joined, the reason we joined was my husband, Jonathan, has Parkinson's disease, and he was a heavy equipment operator. We We've done real estate investing, but the problem with that is we keep running out of cash. And we just didn't have the bandwidth to get into a flipping business, or we just didn't really like the avenues that real estate brought us as we ran out of cash. So we felt like the other option would be business. And so we were looking for, a group that could train us on how to acquire businesses. And that's kind of where we met Carl. And the whole thing, it was overwhelming. I'll be honest. It was overwhelming thinking about all this and going to all the calls. But the whole time through, I think we were able to really stay focused. We were a great team. But I would say, looking back over it, if Jonathan and I can do it, there's nobody who can't do it. If you put your mind to it and you put in the work, you put in the effort, anybody can do it. Jonathan has speech issues. It's very hard for him to speak and write. So, we had to find something that we were able to control, our own business, because, nobody's going to want to hire Jonathan, but we can still run a business. So long story short, we joined in July, into June, beginning of July. Immediate. I mean, like, we started watching Carl's program. We would watch a video and then we would go do that thing. I didn't even know what the next step was, but believe you me, we were doing that first step, not even knowing what was coming next. He says, call brokers, we go call brokers. He says, write letters, we go write, everything he said, we would start just going through, not even knowing what was next. So we kind of jumped in, and there were a few times we felt like we're a little ahead of our knowledge, but, we just watched some more videos and caught up really quick. We immediately got 2 deals under contract. And again, we're just looking for anything remotely in our lane, something that either of us had experience with. I grew up doing construction. My dad owns a construction company. He was a manager at a hardware store, done heavy equipment operating, landscaping, all of that stuff. So we were kind of looking kind of broad, but anything that had experience that we could kind of identify with. Got 2 businesses under contract, and then this third one, which we ended up closing on, was actually a biz buy sell deal. We found, and we were able to talk to the broker, and it seemed like a pretty good deal. And so well, here, you want the specs on it. They were asking 1.2. The EBITDA was about 271,000. And so the first offer we made, we did 2 offers. I think Carl talks about doing 2 offers. One, a seller finance offer. Another one, we did SBA. And he ended up coming back. He did not want to do the seller finance. We kind of went back and forth on that, but he was willing to do the SBA. And I think we ended up getting our LOI for 1.1. Yeah, he was going to carry 5% of the deal. Yeah, the seller carried 5% of the deal, and that was to take advantage of what the SBA, offers as far as lowering our down payment, just more cash in our pocket that we didn't have to put out. So yeah, long story short, we ended up through due diligence dropping the other 2 deals. Things came out. So if I were to throw some stuff out there, is it takes more deals than you think to cross the line, but eventually that right one will come across your plate, and you just have to keep putting in the time. Don't get one deal and stop and think, oh, we're going to take this one home and it's going to be the end. We would have been doing this a lot longer if we did one deal at a time. So I'm really grateful for that. So we joined in July, and this deal, we started talking to the broker around September and ended up closing in March.
And this was 2023, right?
Yes.
Yep. So let's take away some of the lessons here. So I hear a couple things that you did, and I wish everyone did this, but taking some blind faith action at some level, right? Taking massive action, trusting the process. Carl's laying out a 10-step process, literally in order, and it works. And one of the things that we do just as humans is we're reluctant to take action when we don't have clarity. And that's vision around what direction to go in, what our buy box should be, what kind of deal origination strategy should I go after, how am I going to fund these deals? But there's also some level of action you have to take and trust the process. And the fact that if you would have waited and felt comfortable, I have all my ducks in a row, I feel like I know everything I need to know to take action, you would not be sitting on this call today. The opposite happened is when you trust the process, You took massive action. And then the second big lesson I heard here is learning how to punch past the target. This is a Bruce Lee metaphor where he talked about punching past the target always. And what that means in this context is over like putting more effort in than's even needed to make sure you're successful, right? If we know that we want to close 2 deals, let's originate 100. Let's have 50 seller conversations. And Grant Cardone always talks about we underestimate the amount of effort necessary to be successful. And that's not what you did. Instead, you said, okay, let's go get 5 deals under LOI, knowing one of them is going to stick, not having improper expectations, thinking I'm going to get 1 deal under LOI and it's going to close, right? So I think those are the 2 lessons that I heard. Are there any other big lessons? If you could fast forward, I'm sorry, let's go backwards. If we could rewind all the way back to day one, you know everything you know today, what could you have done differently or faster? And what advice would you have to somebody who hasn't started this journey yet?
Well, I want to throw one thing in there real quick before I forget it, but you talking about, you know, especially if you're just joining, something I've really noticed is in the community, there are so many different personalities, so many different talents, so many different qualities. Don't feel like you have to hit everything. You can partner. And that's something, Jonathan had to do. He's like, okay, I can't speak and I can't write, but his mind is he's extremely good with math. He's very good with numbers. He can analyze deals. So he found that thing that he could do. I'm not an analyzer, so but I could talk to brokers, I can build relationships, I can go out. So like we were able to partner as a family and we were able to get the deal across. But if there's somebody who feels like, hey, I can't do this, I can't do that, it's okay. There's someone in the community who can. You just have to advertise what you're good at, get really, get even better at it and partner with somebody inside of the group.
So the group made a big difference. Going back to the other question too, and we're going to talk more about the group next, is if you could rewind, go back to day one for you, you and Jonathan know everything you know now, you have all your experience. What would you do differently? And then what advice do you have someone just getting started? Besides
Yeah,
the go out to the group and find somebody to help you.
Yeah, I think with the deal that the very specifically to the deal that we closed, a commercial landscaping business, the one thing that we did good, but I would have done a little bit better is really understand the sales cycle and how long it's going to take you to get paid. And then also the factor that you just have to really understand if you're selling if this seller is going to get the AR, how long is that going to take before you really start getting cash flow? We kind of knew, but it was a little longer than we thought with it being commercial. There's a longer pay period. You're doing a lot of work before these bigger companies are paying you. But for us, we're putting out a lot of money with the plant material and so on. So, we ended up pulling on our lock, which we had prepared for. So it was good, but I just would want to make sure that we understand, and if somebody's buying a business, make sure you understand that sales cycle, how long it's going to be. And then on top of that, if they're taking that AR, that means the paycheck, and how does that compound, the sales cycle and how long you'll get paid. Just prepare for that. If you needed to, get a lock ready or whatever, have cash on hand.
Some of the lessons that I teach specifically in Protégé and a lot of the advanced track on Tuesdays for people who own businesses or have done deals is we talk a lot about understanding the business model. How does the commerce actually flow? What is their normal overhead? Who's actually running the business? What does the sales process look like? What are they doing for customer acquisition? And the more you know about these business models, the more you can be prepared. So one of the things that I've been teaching a lot, and Carl does, is when we have our buy box, part of becoming a safe pair of hands is really understanding the business model intimately. And that will extra like really, really enhance your conversations with the seller as well and show that you are a safe pair of hands. So that's good advice. Like really understand the business that you're buying and understand all the workings so there's no surprises. Just like flipping houses, right? We're going to find surprises no matter what, but the more research we do up front. Well, thank you so much. And thanks for coming on and telling us about your deal. You were talking about the community for a second. And what I want to do next is I want to jump over to Jamie Busby.
Well, one thing I love about Jamie is, he's a serial acquirer. He owns lots of different businesses now. He's always traveling. He has more vacations than anybody, right? He's in
He
Turkey right
does.
now. Then the other week he was in Colombia. He was in India. So he's this ultimate owner, investor, nomad. that travels the world, having lots of fun, and all his businesses are still executing while he's in them, right? It's like it's my ultimate mantra is, be an owner investor, not an operator, because then you don't have to be in the business every day to make it grow. So yeah, looking forward to this.
So think about why you want to buy a business. Carl, you talk about all the time that people don't actually want to buy a business. They want the benefits of business ownership. For
Yeah.
Jamie, it seems like based off what you just said, maybe time and location freedom is one of the big things that you wanted, and that's why you became a deal maker. But I want to touch on what we have on the screen here. Can you guys see this Facebook post from you, Jamie, and your beautiful picture? Yeah, remember when you posted this? I think it was about a year into Protégé. I remember how you and I first met in the movie business. We call that a meet cute, right? We talked on the phone. I was in Vegas. We were doing a big event in 2022. We were talking about kind of where you are. And one of the things that kept coming up in that conversation is how you are advanced, right? You do have a giant deal flow funnel. You had 100 deals in the hopper. You've got lead generation on lockdown. You've closed multiple deals. And one of the questions we had going back and forth is, is Protégé really the right thing for you? Because you've already done a lot of this, right? But then you ended up joining. A year later, you posted this. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I sold my first successful business, let's say back in 2007, and shortly afterwards I bought my first business back in 2008, and leveraged myself to the hilt, as we say. All my own money, big mistake. Certainly burnt my fingers, if you have that saying. And back in 2017, I was looking for more creative ways to buy a business. But although I'd sold one with a seller note, I never thought about buying one that way until I heard of this guy called Carl Allen. This is back in the Ninja acquisition days. Being a business partner, we did the training, and within 6 to 12 months, we'd bought a business. And I think owning a business, owning something that is a legacy, right? It's part of your pension, it's part of your future, it's part of your children's future, potentially, if you want it to be. It is life-changing. And I think my primary reason was coming back to the Protégé. It wasn't selfish, it was to come and give back. But when I stepped into the group, kind of expecting to be one of the more experienced people, which maybe I am, there was still a massive amount to learn. Just a lot to learn. But that isn't the key takeaway. The key takeaway is definitely the network, and Valerie touched on it earlier in much better language than I can use. It's just such a diverse network that no matter where you think you're weak or strong, there's other people there to support you. And there's some people on this panel that I consider very dear friends as well. So there are much more powerful opportunities than you think there are, just by leveraging that community. And I met someone who's now my US business partner. I'm UK based, as you can tell by my strange accent. And we were working on a very large deal last year that there's no way I would have been able to A, work on a deal that large, or B, work on a US deal without that network. For me, that network's been life-changing. I think everything you need to get a deal done is there, mostly because of the network.
It's been huge. It's been huge. Carl, do you have anything to add to that? I remember it pretty vividly when I saw this post the first time, what I was just showing a second ago. And I think it was a moment for Carl and I where we felt really validated, because something that Carl's vision that we've been executing together as a big Protégé family, I think it was the first moment it was real for me, Carl, that this is so much bigger than just coaching. And
yeah, it is. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And what I think people like Jamie, and then we'll hear from Alok and Lenny as well, as part of this. I think Protégé is a place for everybody, right? It's a place for people that are super advanced and have already made tens of millions of dollars as a deal maker. Number one, they can still learn, from me, but then to really go to an even higher level. But then more importantly, they can partner and they can give back to other people in the community that maybe are just getting started, right? So that's the thing I love most about Protégé, Chris. It's a place for everybody to thrive, no matter what level you're at or your experience. There's a place for all those people.
So Jamie, with all the deals you've done in the past, and you found Carl when you want to do creative deal structures, you've been on quite a ride. One thing that you and I have talked about a lot is you actually had some existing businesses like your modeling agency. And some of the stuff you've picked up in Protégé, some of the
Yeah.
stuff in our trainings and conversations, you've actually taken not just the acquisitions training, but all the additional stuff that people don't even know exists. And you've been able to leverage that to grow your existing businesses. Can you talk about that for a second?
Yeah, exactly. So like you just mentioned, a couple of years ago, I bought the largest models and talent people agency in the southwest of England, and I'd arguably say it's now the largest commercial agency in the UK. And how have we grown that? You know, how do you take the biggest business of its type and yet it's still, it's double what it was a year ago? How do I do that? And it wasn't one big thing. Oh, we should have been doing this. We just do everything better, like everything, every small little thing. And you've got your 7 ways to win, right, Chris? But basically, Chris has got a matrix of simple things that we do every day. So, a social media post or write a blog or something we do weekly, and we think about how does the business communicate with the outside world? Because not only are we wanting to communicate with our clients, but as well as our customers, our suppliers are the models, and we want to attract new talent all the time. So it's really important that we are speaking about this every day, like constantly talking about it. And before I bought it, it was everyone's job to do social media, but no one was accountable, responsible. And we took your matrix and that fundamentally changed part of the business. There's other things that you just pick up by osmosis, right? You can be on a call and someone will say they did something in their business, and it's like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. And people talk about a seller call they might have done, and they spoke to the seller, and the seller's business did one thing particularly well, and they share that, and you're like, oh yeah, that's relevant to mine. So it's not just the learning from within the group. It's all experience that comes from speaking to other business owners as well. So yeah, it's not just a case of you come in, you learn how to buy a business. There's a lot there about how you grow that business, and there's people there that have exited businesses like myself, and how, knowing what I know now, I wouldn't have sold the business the way I did. I know how to prep that for sale now to maximize that value. So it's not, yeah, exactly, Chris. It's not just come in and learn how to buy a business. There's a lot more than that.
We talk about a lot on the front end is people want to do what? They want to buy a cash flowing business, but really that's only 10% of the journey. It goes so much further beyond that. So one of the things that Carl and I have done and some of our other coaches, if we've made a renewed commitment to focusing a lot more on post acquisition and growth as well, because we want you not to just buy the business, but have the ability to grow it and have the ability to go out and hunt for an exit. And that's a really big part of the overall process. So I'm glad that you're able to talk about that a little bit, because so many people don't know what's behind the curtain for something like Protégé, where what happens once I buy a business. Believe it or not, that's one of the biggest fears people have up front is what happens if I do buy a business and I figure that out? What do I do next? Or how do I grow it? Or I'm not great at managing, or I'm not great at running businesses. And there's so much more behind the curtain in the Protégé than just the acquisition stuff. But we want to be with you for the whole ride. So thank you, Jamie, for coming on. Thanks for taking time out of your busy day in Turkey. I don't even know what time it is there. Hopefully we're not keeping you up too late. Well, Carl, why don't we go to Justin next? I know Justin is somebody pretty close to your heart as well. We'll go ahead and throw
Yeah,
him.
he is, right? So look, I want to tell you the story about how I met Justin Hertz, right? And the incredible success that he's had inside of this community, right? So a couple of years ago, I became really good buddies with Pace Morby, right? Who owns the sub two community. And I think Laura, this is where I met you as well. Is so Pace reached out to me and he's like, "Hey, I got all these people trying to do real estate, and they all want to pivot into mergers and acquisitions, and you're the guy, you're the number one coach in the world. Will you come to my mastermind and teach this stuff?" So I'm like, "Yeah, okay." So flies to Phoenix, talking to Pace's community, and it was great. And afterwards, he took me out for dinner. He knows I like fancy sushi, so he takes me to Nobu in Scottsdale, right? So we're in Nobu in Scottsdale having some fun, and he said, why don't you do real estate?" I said, "I don't know. I'm a business acquisitions guy. I'd rather just buy businesses." He's like, "Yeah, that's because you don't know how to do it." I said, "Well, it's the same for you, Pace. How many businesses have you acquired?" Well, like none. I'm a real estate guy. So he said, "Well, let's make a bet, right?" He said, "You go and do a real estate deal. I'll go and do this with Pace. Pace will go and do a business acquisitions deal, and let's see who can get the deal done quicker." So we put Pace into Protégé for a little bit. I joined the sub two community, and like a business acquirer, first thing I did was, what's my buy box? Well, I thought I like going to Florida. I'd love a really nice big 6-bedroom house that I can Airbnb, and then I got a place to stay when I'm with my family, and it's going to get me some great cash flow. So put my buy box into the sub two community, and Justin Hertz was one of the 15 or 20 people that reached out to me and said, "Hey, I've got this deal. It's actually my own property, but I'm looking to offload it. I'll do a creative deal with you," right? So we did that deal. I don't know whether I should tell him on this call, but I've made so much money out of that deal. It's not even funny. Right? It's a great house. I've only ever stayed in it twice, I think. But every single day it's full. It makes a lot of money. But we just became friends because not only did he sell me the deal, which was very good, he helped me transact it as well because I'd never done a real estate deal before. So he was really friendly in helping me do it. And then I did another sub two deal a few weeks later, and he became my transaction coordinator, completely off his own back, just wanted to help me. So I thought, what a great guy giving back to me. So I said, "Well, Justin, like, I think you should do business acquisitions." And I was going to let him into Protégé for free, right, as a thank you. But he said, "No, if it's free, I won't value it, right? If I invest like everybody else, I'm going to dial in, and I'm going to do it." And what was great about Justin, and I think this is the same thing with a lot of real estate investors, you already have a lot of the skills that you need to buy businesses, right? You know how to define a buy box, you know how to originate opportunities, you know how to vet deals, you know how to build relationships, and you know how to raise capital if the project actually needs it, right? So I had really high hopes when Justin joined, but I have to say was blown away with what he did, and that's why he was Dealmaker of the Year last year, and we gave him that massive award, which is very, very rare. Like, we've done $1 billion worth of deals in this community, that there's been some unbelievable successes, but and you've said goodbye to your W2 now, right? So you've bought all these deals. You're in a massive deal with Lenny down in Florida, which I've looked at and is going to be crazy. But yeah, Chris, I'll let you like talk to Justin. But yeah, he's has a very special place for me in this community.
Yeah, Justin, I also remember the time where we were in Denver in Colorado Springs area for something with a business that we owned, and you actually drove to the airport and sat down and had a beer with us. That was the first time we got to actually see each other face to face.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was a special time as well. And then I remember it felt like a blink of an eye, and then you and Dallas, your partner, ended up closing a deal, and then within a month, I think you got your second deal. Correct me if I'm wrong, pretty quickly. You're in the electrical contracting space. What else I thought was cool is your background. Like, you were hanging on power lines, dude. This isn't like somebody coming. Sree was from corporate. We have a couple people on here who've done some big exits. Like, you're hanging on power lines. All of a sudden, you're owning multiple electrical contracting businesses. You're going after another one. And then even one day, you're such a giver. I had a young man who needed some advice, who was from your industry that wanted to get entrepreneurship, and you even did a mentoring call with him, and that was very, very helpful. But let's go back to the deals you closed because we have a couple more people we want to talk to. Where did you find the deal? And then let's talk about some of the things, some of the ninja moves that you learned from Carl that you used to close those deals.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for the kind words, Carl and Chris, and thanks for
welcome.
having me. So I guess I'm probably going to buck the system on this, and all of my deals have been broker deals. I've got all mine from Biz Buy Sell. The first one that we closed on was a larger electrical contractor. They were doing about 2.7 in revenue and about a little over 500 in EBITDA. We got that one with an SBA loan for $1.2 million.
Wow, that's a
And
low principal.
yeah, it was great. And then the second one was a smaller business that we did a tuck in with, and that one was doing about 700,000 in revenue, and I think it was maybe around 150, 200 in EBITDA, something like that. But yeah, the smaller one was a good strategic move because it allowed us to kind of broaden our horizons on the geographical scope on it. And yeah, it's been great. Like Carl said, I was able to leave my W-2, which I was trying to get out of for a long time. It's been completely life-changing. I mean, doing that deal with Carl was meeting him, and as a guy that's worked on power lines my entire life, I had no idea that a regular guy could go and buy a business. I just thought that was something that big corporations did. I had no idea. And it's been great. I mean, like I said, I quit my W-2. I've had way more time with my family now. I haven't had to work a late night or a weekend or anything, and it's been amazing.
Let's talk about some of the seller psychology that's come into play with some of your deals. I remember you called Carl one day, you guys had a one-on-one, and he told you to make an offer in a certain way. And the guy, you weren't sure if it was going to work, and he instantly said yes. Let's talk about that real quick.
Yeah, and actually, unfortunately, that deal kind of fell through. He kind of changed a bunch of the terms, and his numbers just weren't that great. But yeah, we had
That's okay.
a business that was the guy wanted kind of a lot of money for it. I thought it was decent for our roll up, but I just knew that it was way overvalued. So when I talked to Carl, he said, offer him. I think it was 25 years on an annuity deal, and originally he was all for it instead of just doing the SBA or a 10-year deal because it just wouldn't cash flow. And at first he was all for it, but yeah, unfortunately he kind of changed his mind and wanted a bunch of money down to where it just wasn't viable anymore.
But for where you're sitting, we went back to Valerie and Jonathan having the power of choice and having a deep pipeline full of deals as you're doing your roll up. If something falls through, that's okay. Keep moving. Like that's the whole point of punching past the target. Let me ask another question. Your vision right now, you're doing an electrical contracting roll up. Let's rewind 5 years ago. You're doing very different things in life. When you came into Protégé, what was the vision at that moment? And then how has that evolved since then? Has it gotten bigger?
Oh, it's gotten way bigger. I mean, the first Protégé call that I got on, I thought I was way outside of my element. People were talking about private equity and using all these terms that honestly, I had no idea what they were talking about. And I had no idea of the power of roll-ups or buying businesses. My drive was I wanted to get out of my W-2. So I just, kept showing up. And a lot like Valerie said, a lot of times I would see something in a training and just say, well, that's what they're saying to do. So I'm just going to go do it. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm going to try it because, Carl and Chris and all these guys are saying to do that. So let's see what happens.
But when you started, like, what was the goal? What was the buy box at that moment? Was it just to buy one electrical contracting company? Was that where your vision was?
Yeah, I kind of wanted to stick in the construction space somewhere. That's all I know. I didn't really know what. At first, I was looking at, landscaping, plumbing, HVAC, electrical, anything. And then, as I started dialing it down, I wanted to just go with electrical. But I would say that that's even changed too. I have going to a seller meeting here in a little bit to go meet with a plumbing and HVAC company. Could be part of our roll up here as well. But I mean, just the longer I'm in this community, I think my vision and just seeing what's possible, it just keeps growing.
And I think it's interesting as you got into kind of the higher levels of being with us a little bit more intimately, like in upper echelon and 9FB, your vision, I've seen your vision that you and Dallas have continuously change. And it looks at the same amount of effort that it takes to close one deal that's maybe $500,000 in revenue. It's the same amount of effort to close a $5 million deal, and it's actually easier to finance. And then from there, once you own that first business, it's so much easier to get the next one and the next one. So I think it's been cool to watch your journey and your vision expand. I mean, you went from doing what you're doing before, doing some real estate deals, already successful. You had some level of imposter syndrome, fell out of depth, took some massive action, bought some businesses, you've gone all in, and now your vision is expanded to the point where potentially, and this is not necessarily even far-fetched, in the industry that you're playing in, private equity is buying, and they are paying up to 10, if not higher, multiples, 10x multiples. You could be staring at, I mean, literally $100 million exit in the next 3 to 4 years if you continue on your trajectory. And if you look back at what you were doing a couple of years ago, if that doesn't blow your mind, I think you're not human, because that blows my mind. But I think it's cool to watch how not only have you started taking massive action, you got some deals done, you've got a running mate with Dallas, all of a sudden you've got an advisor with Lenny, you've got all these people in your corner, and you're going to accomplish something that only what 1% of 1% of 1% of the world will ever do. So I just think it's really powerful, and we're proud of you.
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate that.
No problem.
Amazing.
It's huge. It's
I
huge.
got goosebumps, Chris. Like, I got to tell you, man, this is crazy. Like, this is crazy what we're doing, man. I'm so proud of like what we've built. It really is special.
It is, man. Every time you and I get together at these events, you look over at me and say, you know, this is what we've built this. Thanks for being a part of this vision with me. And man, it's a blessing. So Alok, welcome.
Thank you.
Alok, you know, you're a little bit of a different journey, right? Your journey to coming to our world didn't start the same as everybody else's. Tell us a little bit about your journey, your background, and then how you got involved with our community.
Sure. So my background, 2.5 decades professional experience in consulting, doing corporate strategy, mergers, acquisitions, divestitures, bankruptcy emergence, transformations. I worked overseas for 5 years doing cross-border deals, international transactions. I was one of the leaders of the largest pan-country telecom launch in India. It was a $20 billion investment by Mukesh Ambani. I was working with him and his ELT to get it to launch smoothly and on time. I came back to the States. I was one of the leaders of the eBay PayPal separation, working with John Donahoe, who was the CEO at the time, and his ELT. I gained 60 pounds on the first 2 months of that project and decided that I loved what I did, but I just got to do it differently. And so that's what led me to create Low Key Group, where I wanted to get into private equity in a different way and, kind of create that path on my own. Didn't necessarily want to raise a fund. And honestly, at that point, I was like, I don't know how to start to raise a fund. I was just coming back to the States and trying to figure out my network. As you can imagine, being 5 years jumping around countries, it's hard to keep in touch with the relationships that you have. So started off doing M&A consulting, figuring out how to buy and acquire mid-market companies. I knew how to do it from large organizations, and I worked on some small deals, but again, it was for big enterprise organizations, which those deals are done and structured differently. And when I learned about, Carl Allen and the Protégé community, I first joined in. I mean, Carl, you had, I think at one point launched a monthly newsletter trying to show some deals to help those of us looking for deals. And I initially signed up for that. And that was my first entry into the Protégé program, into the community. But the main thing I wanted to get was how to do things differently, because I knew there was a way to do it differently than how the big guys did it, and how to do things more creatively, right? And that's the real value you get from it. Not to be very frank and honest, again, like we all said, it's the people. It's being surrounded by other people that are in the same boat that you are. People you can talk to about challenges, about being creative on deals and what you want to do, but being surrounded by like-minded people is just really helpful in helping you move forward in what you're doing and knowing that you're not alone.
So yeah, the newsletter was called Dealmaker Picks. I remember that very well.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was awesome. That was a lot of fun. So glad. And you also, the first time we got to meet you, and correct me if I'm wrong, is when you came to hang out at our mastermind we held called Dealmaker Getaway down in Orlando.
Oh, the one in the mansion.
The one in
Yeah.
the mansion. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
that was
actually,
awesome.
yeah, so that was the first time we got to hang out, and you've been a part of our world ever since. But I love all of our conversations. Ironically, you live down the street from a dear friend of mine, and so I'm going to hang out with you when I get to Atlanta. And I need to call you because I'm in that area a lot. But what I love about what you're doing now is you've also been able to help a lot of people. But what I love is some of the conversations we have, which is in Protégé, is not around necessarily any type of deal specifically, but more around strategy, business growth, talk tracks, frameworks, negotiations. Like, did you learn anything in Protégé that you weren't expecting to learn? Did you get access to a certain resource or asset or person that you weren't expecting, but it's been a blessing to your life?
I mean, honestly, working with and or talking with, Carl, yourself, Chris, and the folks that I've become friends with has been helpful. And I mean, honestly, I think part of it is kind of the same bone that you and Carl have. I love helping others, right? Like I don't need to necessarily get anything out of it, but I just love helping others and helping other people talk through things. There was I guess I'm on this WhatsApp chat called Team Goose. I think it's Goose. And Peter, he called me like he had a question about the EIDL being part of a deal and how do you manage it. I happened to respond to him, and then he and I had a 30-minute conversation yesterday about what to do and how to think about deals. And I was sharing a lot of the stuff that we were talking about as well about annuity deals, right? And um, just I get into the details of stuff. Like, I love the ideas and the concepts, but then I like to dive in deep and be like, well, then how do you execute it? What are the nuances to it? Because I feel the nuances help us in the negotiation process. So when we talk to a seller and we want to talk about a annuity deal, there's a way to talk about it. What I also want to understand is, well, what are the tax implications on it and how can we build that back in? So there's one deal I'm working on right now. Um, and it's not an annuity deal, but it's with another asphalt paving company. And what was interesting is he threw out a number of what he thought the business was worth. I kind of quickly did backwards math as to what he would pocket what he would put in his pocket if we did the deal. I was going to take 80% of the business, then he's got to pay taxes, etc., and he's left with this amount of money. And just really quickly, I was like, well, what if I can get you the same amount of money or more in your pocket, but I get myself a better valuation? Would that be okay? And he was just surprised. Like, you can do that? It's like, of course. If I can get you more money in your pocket and get me a better valuation where we then can grow this together and get a bigger bite of the apple later, why not? And he's all about it. He's like, yeah, if I make the same amount of money in my pocket, great. It's like, all right, we're going to help you cut on your taxes. And there's a couple of different ways to do so. Is one, using a trust structure in place. One of the key things on using that cost structure is you cannot have a signed LOI before the assets or the stock are moved into the trust. So so that's why I haven't signed anything with them yet, because we have to get the trust structure in place first, if that's the path. Or if the company is a C corp, you can do what's a QSBS, a quality small business stock transaction. Now there's certain stipulations on what's allowed or not allowed as far as industries and whatnot, how old the company has to be. But that's another way that each owner would get if they do a sale of their business, up to $10 million is tax free. And so there's two owners, and I was definitely valuing this business below 10 million. So yeah, they'd both get it tax free if we were able to go that path. So there are ways to be creative in creating the structure. And again, it goes back to, as both you and Carl share, is it's finding out what the other side really wants. And back to Dealmakers, when we were with Chris Voss, it's that tactical empathy, right? Asking questions. What are you looking for? How are you looking to do this? What's happening? Really understand what is the other side's motivation. And then from that, basically kind of Jedi mind trick them into, well, here's what we're going to do, and have them feel skin in the game in that coming path going forward.
And Carl, your book is called The Creative Deal Maker for a reason. I mean, all these creative deal structures, and what Carl and I have talked about several times, and also our partner Jeremy Bronson, is how impressed we are with the creative deal structures we're learning from our students, right? There's so many
Yeah.
people out there that are finding new angles that we've never even thought of, or things maybe, Carl, that you've known to do, but you haven't got a chance to get to a deal where you can leverage it yet. And we're all learning from each other. And I think that's one of the powerful pieces of our group.
It's crazy, right? So literally just today. So one of the things we do every week in Protégé is we have something called the red light, green light call. So it's a chance where we review Protégé deals. They pitch us. There are investors in the Protégé community that are partnering with people on deals. And one of the deal structures today, I think, was David Mulvaney's deal. It was an engineering business that focused in on the aerospace and the military sectors. And he'd come up with this really interesting structure about, so we talk about earnouts a lot, which is how you can make bonus payments to sellers in the future based on higher financial performance. But he combined that with rollover equity, and that the equity would ratchet down over time because he would use the surplus cash flow from that growth to start to buy the seller out of other parts of the deal. And guys, I'm 33 years into this stuff, right? Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of deals. And I've never done a deal structure like that. So I learned a new deal structure today. And I've got a seller call tomorrow. I'm buying a financial services company. It's actually an asset, Lenny, this is a 9FB deal. We're looking at buying an asset management business, which is in Nassau, of all places. And that deal structure is going to work beautifully with that deal, right? And again, it's crazy. I'm coaching you guys, but I'm learning stuff in the process. It's insane.
It's a beautiful thing, but that's the power of community. And that's the thing that I heard so many times. I've had so many conversations with people in our group, Carl, and I say, what was the one thing that surprised you? What was the thing that you weren't expecting that was a blessing? And it's so much, it comes back to the community. It comes back to there's someone who has an answer to my question. It comes back to the fast feedback loop. So I'm not asking a question into an empty inbox in some customer service center, but I'm actually getting answers from people. And then the last thing is how impressive they are at the level of the group. People in the group that they had no clue existed. Jamie, I remember you and I've spoken before, and it was kind of cool. Like your best friends came from the group. We actually had a marriage happen between two protégés as well last year, which kind of blew Carl's in my mind. We're like, wow, it's like a matchmaking service. So I think it's those hidden things. And thanks for being a go-giver and giving back as well, Alok, because I know your experience level and your heart for teaching and helping other people. And Jamie's the same way. Uncle Lenny's the same way. We have all these people who've been in our world who've already been successful for a long time. We actually attract a lot of those people. And it's cool because they're there not just to make money, but also to help other people get where they are. So thank you for being that person. We only have a certain amount of time here, so I'm going to keep moving. We're going to go over to somebody who won Chris's Top Pick Award at our Dealmaker Live in Orlando. Laura Reeves, you and your fiance and wonderful man, Steve, work together. We're excited about the wedding coming up, of course. Just became a grandmother. Congratulations there. But you've closed multiple deals. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. So there's so much to say, but I will cut it as short as possible for time. I started this journey as someone coming from the real estate world that Carl had mentioned. I was in the sub-2 community learning creative ways to buy properties. And when I saw Carl and he was talking about businesses, I knew immediately that I had to switch gears and do business. Just because to me, I like to put in the work once, and if I can profit as much as possible with that effort once, then yay for me. It just made sense for us. So our journey, so Steve's in a different buy box than I am. So I do more of like warehouse and landscape. Well, landscape's actually the only thing that we do actually do in common, but he's much more home services, construction, roofing, that type of thing. So At first, when we joined Protégé, it was more like, okay, let's think of a business we can do together, and then we'll just do that one. But then being inside Protégé, and suddenly they just opened up our mind of, wow, just we can do so much together that we didn't even realize was possible. So to make a long story short, I'm working on two massive roll-ups because I used the people from this community that maybe Steve and I can't work on all of it together, but so warehousing, I've partnered with other people, and trucking, actually I've never driven a truck. So but it doesn't matter because I've partnered with people that have, and warehousing and trucking goes hand in hand. So I've got that going on, and I've also got home services roll-ups going on with Steve and a whole different crew of team members. And the funny thing is, the first business that I closed was an e-commerce business because I owned my own social media management company for 10 years, but that's before I had the vision. So I don't know how to say this, but e-commerce kind of bores me because I did it for so long. So it just it wasn't something that I saw that I could probably grow it big, but I just didn't want to really. So yeah, that's the first business was e-commerce. And what I can tell people about this entire journey of mine is it's taught me a lot of things. First, to let go of the control, and let the people that are smarter than me in different parts of what I need, let them thrive and shine. And I'm good in my wheelhouse. I'm great at the negotiations. I'm great at the people skills. I'm really great at drawing people in to want to work with me or us or my team or whatever it is. But when it comes to certain other aspects, find those people that are going to make it all work, and make sure that you like to work with them. If you don't like going out and having a beer with them, I really honestly suggest finding another partner or partners or whatever the case may be. But yeah, I should be like their poster child, because this is my family. I'm not going anywhere ever. This is my family. This is my niche. Nothing has ever made me so happy and excited. I just wish I had met them all 20 years ago. But this is it for me. And I'm nothing, I'm no big deal. It's just, you don't have to be, That's
Business acquisitions more accessible to the common people like us than we know.
yeah.
And I think one of the beautiful things about really powerful visionaries and leaders in our world, if you look at someone like an Elon or a Jeff Bezos, they have the ability to take things that are out of reach for the average person, simplify it down, and make it so the average person can step in and be successful. And that's what, Carl, you've done. I mean, you've taken something that has not been accessible to the main street world, and you've put it into action. So thanks for doing that. And you were the original person to ever coach us online. We are the cutting edge. We are the innovative company. You're not just doing or coaching, you're also doing. But I think one of your favorite things, Carl, I hear a lot when you and I just have our conversations, whether when it's you're wrecking my boat or we're having a Guinness pint in Austin, is how there's certain people who really have your heart, because not only have they taken massive action and found success, but they're helping others as well. And that's what I see on this group of people on the call, which is beautiful. And we are excited about your wedding, by the way, and we're fully intending on being there. Yeah. Well, thank you. One last question, then we're going to go to Uncle Lenny. My question for you is this. Obviously, your vision's expanded like crazy. Obviously, you came in and you and Steve talked about, should we go separate directions? There's a way for us to work together? You did buy your first business, kind of bores you now. Now you're on to bigger things. You've got a big roll up going in several different ways. All that's wonderful, but bring it back to the beginning here. Somebody who's here watching, who has aspirations of changing something in their life, whether it's getting away from the W-2, like Justin Hertz was talking about, whether it's kind of doing what I was doing on a major scale in corporate for other companies, building somebody else's shareholder value, like Alok coming over and doing it now for himself. I mean, for somebody in those different positions, they know they want something new. They know they want to see a change in their life. Is business acquisition something that is obtainable? And is it something you'd recommend? Because there's a lot of directions people can go in. You can be brutally honest.
Yes. So I think a lot of the things that I've learned within Protégé is also about myself. So like I said, with the control and there was some fear issues too there. There's so much in business acquisitions, or I should say in this particular community, that I've learned how to get over the fears, like my fear of talking to a seller from a construction world. My Steve that Chris is talking about, he's working full time in his W-2. One of my whys is to get him out completely. So that is a huge why. But the person that's talking to the sellers is me. So I am their first line of communication, and I was afraid for a while to do that. And once I got over that fear from talking and learning from people within Protégé, to get over the fact that I'm a woman, to get over the fact that I have painted nails and I might be talking to a guy that's been in construction for 20 years, they don't care. They just want a safe pair of hands, and they want to make sure that you are going to take care of their legacy moving forward. So I don't know if I just got off the track, because I do that a lot. I'm 57. Okay, that happens. But anyway, to get back to what you were saying, yes, I think business acquisitions has a place for every walk of life. I don't care if you're 25. I don't care if you're 65. It really doesn't matter. I just gave away my age, and I'm not afraid of business acquisitions at my age. It means absolutely nothing. I have a purpose. I know what I'm doing. I have a timeline and I have a plan. And this community has made it so much easier to navigate those waters, if it makes sense.
Interesting thing you touched on it is really kind of your vision and your plan and being able to execute. But what was interesting is when you started, you didn't have that vision or that plan. What you knew is that you didn't want to just do real estate, and you wanted to do something once that paid you continuously, your exact words. So it's interesting. Some people in life decide that I'm going to wait to jump into something until my vision's crystal clear, because I have one shot at it, compared to you took a different approach where you said, I know what I'm looking to accomplish. I'm going to jump in, and I'm comfortable with my vision evolving over time. And I think that's a major differentiator with people in life who are very successful and the ones who aren't. There's something inside of us that holds us back, where we don't want to move forward in something because we don't know if we're going to be successful. And instead, we have paralysis of analysis, and then they have regret on January 1st every year because they didn't accomplish anything, right? But what you've done differently is that you didn't let that stop you. You knew what you wanted, you went after it, and you were comfortable with the journey dictating the designation or the destination. So I applaud you for that. Any feedback on that, Carl? Because I know for you like women deal makers, military athletes, because they listen, they pay attention, and they do what you ask them to do, and that's why you're successful. But what do you think, Carl?
Yeah, I think, a lot of value in what Laura's been saying. And I think, we talked about it earlier with Justin, right? I think, Laura and Steve came into Protégé with a lot of those skill sets that are transferable, right? So it's originating opportunities, talking to sellers, building relationships. Laura's a very, very dear friend of mine now, invited me to their wedding. She's very, very close friends with my wife. They text all the time. Laura, I actually said to Julia, said, hey, Laura's one and get the guest panelists on my Zoom. So I'm working from home today. Do you want to come in and say hi? She's like, no, my hair's not right. All those different things. But no, we absolutely love you guys. And, it's just such a privilege to have you in this community. So thank you.
The one big thing, and we're going to jump over to Uncle
Love
Lenny
you,
here,
sister.
is talking about the concept of imposter syndrome. We've heard it come up several times, and it's not a quiet confidence in yourself that everyone has instinctively, right? But it's being comfortable with putting yourself in a position to be uncomfortable. And that's where growth happens. Carl, do you know anybody in life who's grown when they haven't put themselves in an uncomfortable state, right? We have to get uncomfortable to grow. And
Yeah.
what I hear Laura and several other people have said so far is like, I didn't know how this would work for me. I didn't know how my background would translate, but they found that if they just trust the process, that everything fell into place. And I just think it's powerful. Well, I would say last but not least, no, I'm just kidding, definitely not least, Uncle Lenny, welcome to hanging with us. Probably the most generous and giving man I've ever met. Another one of those people that are not just in the community, but really dear friends of ours. I know you and my parents are really good friends as well. I know Laura and my mom definitely hit it off. Like you joined the family, you didn't join the program. So just want to chat with you a little bit. And your journey is very different than most other people, right? You had already found a very high level of success. You took a big exit and you've kind of changed your vision quite a bit from when you decided to come out of retirement because this really amazing man named Carl popped up in your Facebook feed and told you could buy a business, right? So tell us a little bit about your journey.
Wow, this has been incredible. And I want to thank everybody that's on this call, not only the panel, but everybody who's dialed in. Man, I put some bullet points together and there's so many like incredible nuggets that have come out of this conversation. I wanted to talk a lot about the community, but I know we're getting near the end, so I won't, except to say, Carl, if you remember when we were doing that hike in Tennessee, I said that the credit goes to you and Chris. Remember when we almost saw not almost, we saw the poisonous snake.
We did.
And so for you people that are on this call, we also have a lot of fun. And I said to you and Julia, because we were hiking side by side, and I said, in my years of experience building businesses, it trickles from the top down. And this community wouldn't be this community if it weren't for you guys. You guys help first. And I'll get to myself in a second, Chris, but I also remember another thing that stuck out fairly early in my Protégé career when I was on, I think, a Friday Foundation call. And another one of our dear friends that's in Protégé, she was struggling. She had been in, I think, for maybe a year or so, and she had not gotten her first deal. And Carl took the entire hour and a half just working with her on that one deal so he could get her over the finish line. It just blew my mind. I'm 63. I've been in a million groups before. They sign you up, they tell you all these different things, and then all of a sudden, you don't even see them for months at a time. So that just absolutely blew my mind apart, that you took the time, an hour and a half, to help one person get their first deal. Doesn't happen out there. But anyway, my journey, I spent 30 years building a business in the commercial janitorial industry. Didn't know a whole lot about M&A. Matter of fact, when we sold the business, I didn't know half the stuff they were talking about. But I had a CFO, and I was able to read financials and things like that. But we exited the business. A few years later, I retired. And then I got that Facebook ad that Chris was talking about. And Carl and Chris unretired me. So now all of a sudden, you hear probably in a lot of Carl's teachings about how, we're after these baby boomers that want to retire. So I'm the baby boomer who unretired, thanks to these guys. But thanks to these guys because it has changed my life. And I know I talked a little bit about the community before, but the community is one of the most powerful things I've ever been involved in. I love to help, but people help me as well. And I'm partnered with several people that have been on this panel. So for you people that are out there who think maybe, how do I do this? Like, how do I start my own business? There are plenty of people in this community that will partner with you in a heartbeat. So it's just such an awesome place to be. Laura said it perfectly. It's now our family. When we get together, we all hug and we have a great time together. When I joined the community, I realized that building a business isn't the same as learning about mergers and acquisitions. And I threw everything into learning about what Carl taught I went through a CEO course. I went back for almost a year and looked at all the key, or rewatched all the key recordings that I felt were important for my journey. And I can say this, my first year, I didn't always attend every Zoom. I watched it sometimes on recording, but I did not miss one my first year. So I always say this M&A business, it's simple, but it isn't easy. You got to put the work in, you got to put the time in. But when you see a panel here and you see the success stories, and that's why I loved when you did this in Orlando, Chris, it's just so powerful. Because I think you asked a question in Orlando, Chris. You said, I think there was one of the people that were on stage, I think they had just bought a business with $750,000 in EBITDA. But it took them a year and a half. And you said, raise your hand, and the audience was probably 500 people. Raise your hand if you'd wait a year and a half to make $750,000 a year. And of course, everybody raised their hand. So it's such a powerful, powerful program that Carl teaches and Chris teaches. If I had known about it when we sold our business to private equity, but if I look back right now, we were kidding around with Nick Bradley on stage. I was I was the bait. If I had known what Carl teaches now, I would have sold my business probably for 3 or 4 times of what we sold it for. Because with PE at the time, I was the bait. So you learn so much about buying businesses. Right now, since joining, I'm either an investor and a partner in at least 6 different businesses, with more in the queue. And I wake up every day really, really excited about my day. So, if I was retired, maybe I'd be playing pickleball every day, but I'm having way more fun with this group. So thank you for all you've done, Chris and Carl, and all the people that are on this panel. It's been an amazing journey.
Thank you, Lenny.
Thank you for sharing that. I love how the starting point for everyone is different. When they come in, some people are working for someone else. We've had people doing alternative jobs like Uber. We've had people like yourself who've had big exits. And it's amazing how deal making and business acquisitions can be a different outcome and destination for every single person. There's so many different ways to do it. There's so many different creative deal structures, and everyone uniquely has something that they want buying a business to accomplish for them. And it doesn't have to be the same. And that's one of the beautiful things about it, is how versatile it is. So Carl, we're right here kind of at 90 minutes. That's how long we had. Do you want to say a couple words and wrap us up? Thank you for being a part of it.
Yeah, we'll do some Q&A in a minute, but let me just want to say something to you guys. So here's the deal. You've seen today through this session and through this panel with some of my now very dear friends, some other people that have come into the program and had incredible results, that what you've seen is that this isn't just about like my success and me doing deals. I'm going to buy at least 25 businesses this year, maybe more, through the 9FB fund that I've recently launched. But it's all about how members of the Protégé community are doing deals on their own and partnering by learning all the different things. They've taken all the strategies that I've created over 33 years, my blueprints, my systems, and my cheat codes, and they're doing deals for themselves. And it's like joining the marathon right at the end. I'm the guy that's done all the running and put in all the effort, and you can learn from all of that and all the mistakes that I've made over the time. And then they're executing on those things, and they're getting the same results that I am.